2 nights, 2 Democratic presidential debates. We've already gotten a taste of what's going to come in 2020. Things got a little heated last night. When asked about immigration, former Housing Secretary Julian Castro went all in. He also got emotional, talking about the father and daughter who died coming to the United States.
Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off. They have been playing games with people who are coming and trying to seek asylum at our ports of entry. Oscar and Valeria went to a port of entry, and then they were denied the ability to make an asylum claim. So they got frustrated, and they tried to cross the river, and they died because of that.
That was really, really a big moment, had a big impact on that whole entire debate stage. The candidates addressed a slew of other topics: healthcare, climate change, and abortion, to name just a few. They also discussed how they would meet the challenge of the GOP. Here's what Elizabeth Warren had to say.
It's very plausible you be elected president with a Republican Senate. Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell?
I do. But short of the Democratic majority in the Senate, you better understand, the fight still goes on. It starts in the White House, and it means that everybody we energize in 2020 stays on the front lines come January 2021. We have to push from the outside, have leadership from the inside, and make this Congress reflect the will of the people.
All right. Our very own Hill TV's Krystal Ball attended last night's debate, and she has been speaking with the people on the ground. She's joining us now with the latest direct from Florida. I'm looking at that sun on you, Krystal. Hi.
It's nice and warm out here, guys, already. Yeah, how's it going?
Good morning.
So, Krystal, tell us what you're seeing down there on the ground. Who was the big winner out of last night's debate?
I mean, look, in my view, I think Elizabeth Warren did what she needed to do. She looked like the front runner. She articulated her vision very well. She stayed out of the scrum. She didn't take some of the bait on guns and some other issues. So I think she holds her position. She did very well. She looked great. To me, the sort of breakouts of the night were Julian Castro. You played that bite from him talking about immigration. He really went after Beto O'Rourke on that issue as well. And, I think a lot of people who hadn't keyed in on his candidacy took a look at him and saw someone who was smart, who was passionate, who was incredibly articulate, who was strong and tough and able to challenge one of his competitors very effectively. So I thought he had a big night. I think he'll get a second look from a lot of voters. And I thought Cory Booker had a good night. He actually dominated the speaking time, had some very passionate responses, and was pretty effective articulating a vision with some emotion and passion as well. So those were kind of my top line takeaways. A little bit of color from the scene. I'm in this lineup of a bunch of cameras here, a bunch of people doing different TV hits wherever on CNN and other places. And Beto was actually just here in the next position over, giving a long interview, I'm sure trying to do a little bit of cleanup on what I think you have to say was kind of a tough night for him. There was that intra-Texan battle between Julian Castro and Beto, and I'm not sure Beto got the better end of that.
Yeah, Krystal, I like Beto a lot, but I feel like over the last few weeks, he's just still been declining. And last night, it seemed to me that his answers didn't have a lot of meat to them. And Castro did something very interesting from a strategic perspective. He didn't punch up. He didn't go after Trump. He didn't go after Biden. He didn't even go after Warren. He decided to take out one of his rivals. And I thought he went after him hard and really did damage.
Well, and it makes sense, too, because both of them were trying to occupy this lane of, the Texan who really gets the immigration issue. And as we know, Donald Trump has made that issue central and very important. It has a lot of heat and energy around it right now as people are so concerned with the way that kids are being treated at the border. So I think it was a smart strategic play for him. He went up against a rival that he knew he could best, and on an issue that is a core strength for him, and it really elevated him in the lineup, I think.
One of the interesting things, Krystal, is that President Trump was almost not mentioned at all last night's debate. If anything, Mitch McConnell was more of the bogeyman on the stage than the president, who the entire Democratic base wants somebody can defeat. Do you think that was a good or a bad day in last night's debate?
I mean, I don't think you have to say anything about Trump, right? Everybody feels the same way about Donald Trump on that stage. So everybody knows that is the number one goal, to take him out. And that's been the case for these Democrats On this stage, that was the case in 2018. There is constant cable news coverage of Trump, of his every utterance, of his every move, of how much executive time he has. But if you're actually on the ground talking to voters, it's not the thing that they ask about. They take it for granted that he's terrible and he needs to go. So I think that makes sense. On the Mitch McConnell thing, I was actually glad that that was a focus. And we played that bite of Elizabeth Warren talking about how she would deal with if Mitch McConnell was still in control of the Senate. In some ways, that is like the central question, because you can have all the plans in the world, right? You can have all the great ideas, you can have all the energy, you can have all those things. But if you're just going to be stymied by the same old gridlock, what is it for? That's part of how we ended up in this place to start with. I thought Warren's answer was strong, but not, at the end of the day, that great an answer. I'm not sure there is that great an answer, but it kind of looms over this whole thing. By the way, Mitch McConnell is up for re-election in 2020, so maybe we can just beat him too.
And what did you think about Bill de Blasio? It's interesting. I thought he made he made himself relevant in a way that's tough from being in the wings. But I heard a lot of pushback from women on social media last night who just thought he was boorish. What did you think?
I think he's not a joke anymore. He was really kind of the butt of the joke of the field. People were like, what is this guy doing? Why is he here? He's goofy. No one likes him. His own city doesn't like him. And so I think he had to make a move. He had to make himself relevant, and he did that. The moderators were not going to give him a lot of time. And he basically fought and scrapped to get in the mix and articulate a vision. And I have to say, I came away like, oh yeah, I see why this guy has gotten where he is. I see what his vision is. He's very clear. He has very clear moral values. So he's one that I think, it's kind of a Rorschach test. Like, I could see you either really liking his performance or really hating it. But he had to do something, and he did that effectively.
Krystal, we also had that back and forth between Tim Ryan and Tulsi Gabbard, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, do we have that bite? We could take a listen to it.
We cannot keep U.S. troops deployed to Afghanistan thinking that we're going to somehow squash this Taliban that has been there, that every other country that's tried
I didn't say
has failed.
squash them. When we weren't in there, they started flying planes into our buildings. So I'm just saying right now,
The
we have
Taliban didn't attack us on 9/11. Al-Qaeda did.
So Tulsi Gabbard defending the Taliban wasn't a good look for her last night.
Well, that's funny that you see it that way. Because I didn't see her as defending the Taliban. I saw her being the one candidate on the stage taking a clear anti-war stance, and Tim Ryan looking like he had no idea what he was talking about. I mean, completely out of his depth, saying the Taliban flew planes into buildings. No, they didn't. That was Al-Qaeda. I mean, it was just, I don't think that he really knew where he wanted to be on the issue. He wasn't clear about it. I thought it was a good moment for Tulsi. That is her bread and butter, right? She has this controversial, very strongly anti-war stance. She articulated it. She used her, her status as a U.S. military veteran who knows what she's talking about on the issue. And there was, I don't know if you guys saw this, there was a ton of a spike in search traffic on Google for Tulsi Gabbard after that moment. So I think it was a little bit of, a good moment for her to look strong, to look like she was ready to be commander-in-chief and had a very clear vision on these things, if anti-war is kind of where you stand.
Well, Tim Ryan in particular, what did you think of his performance? Because he has always branded himself as, I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, I get the white working class, but he was endorsing a lot of very progressive ideas last night, but also coming out in a more traditional, I guess, centrist conservative way. So what was the reception, I guess, to that lane?
I think it just felt kind of muddled, kind of confused. Like, you didn't quite know whether this guy was in the progressive lane, whether he was in the centrist lane, whether he was in the, school meditation lane. I mean, I just felt like, I felt like he didn't look like he was ready for prime time and hadn't really thought this thing all the way through.
So one more candidate that was on the stage who I think had a big impact. You remember last night when they asked the question of all the candidates, what do you think is the one, the biggest challenge to American leadership? People said China, people said Russia, but the one thread that went all the way through was about climate change. And I wonder if Governor Jay Inslee wasn't making his campaign about climate change, would so many of those candidates had said climate change last night?
That's interesting. I would put the credit somewhere else. And also interesting that Inslee himself didn't actually say climate change. He said Trump, right?
Yeah.
So that was, which was a good applause line,
Right.
but it was kind of interesting. Anyway, I think AOC is the one that really put climate change on the map. I mean, she's the one when she went and protested outside of Nancy Pelosi's office with the Sunrise Movement and made the Green New Deal a major push. She's the one that really forced that debate, and I would say is the reason why climate change has been made so central in terms of these candidates' positioning and, you know, and what voters want to hear. I mean, you poll Democratic voters about the issues they're concerned about. Climate change is at the top or very close to the top. AOC didn't do all of that. That concern existed already, but I really think she's the one that sparked this debate and made it central.
So, but Inslee is a governor now. I think AOC did have a big impact. Inslee is a governor now, and it's interesting that for so long we always thought governors were the ones who were supposed to get to be president next, right? Reagan, Clinton, Bush. But now governors have sort of fallen off lately. Do you think that Inslee had much of an impact at all last night?
No, and I was kind of cheering for him, to be honest with you. I respect him. I like that he's taken. I think his plan on climate change is very smart. It's very serious. I think he's a very serious individual, and it's kind of a testament to our reality show type politics that someone like him, who's been incredibly accomplished politician, effective executive for a number of years, you know, it all boils down to like whether he can have a great zinger or a great soundbite. And I don't know that he. You know, I don't think he made any big blunders last night, but I also don't think that he popped in the way that a Julian Castro or a Cory Booker did.
What about Amy Klobuchar, Krystal? She had that moment on abortion, which was interesting. But overall, I mean, she did stick to a centrist, a Democratic lane, which seems semi-well received by the crowd.
Yeah, I think that's another Rorschach test. I personally, as a progressive, were not like too excited about what she was selling, but that's my own ideological bias, right? I think a lot of people who are looking for someone who can clearly articulate a centrist position with passion would like what she had to say. You know, I like the way she framed her healthcare plan rather than conceding that it was more moderate choice to go with a public option. She framed it in terms of this is what Barack Obama wanted to do but couldn't get done because it was a bridge too far. You know, I think there's a constituency for that. I don't know that that constituency is really looking for someone other than Joe Biden right now. But if Biden has a misstep and people are looking around for like who's the other moderate choice, then maybe Amy Klobuchar gets a look.
That's a good point.
Can I ask you one more question before we break? What's your expectation for tonight? What do you think we're going to see?
That's so hard. You know, I think it'll be a little bit like last night was. And by the way, kind of my takeaway from last night is there are a couple candidates who did themselves some favors. They might get a couple point bump. I don't know that anything really game-changing happened, though, right? The field has been remarkably stable. You've had Biden at the top. You've had Bernie and now Warren kind of in second and third, and you've got Buttigieg hanging in there, Harris maybe a little bit below that. It's been fairly stable because people who like Biden, people who want a progressive like either Warren or Bernie, and did anything happen last night to really move folks down in that position? I don't know. And so I kind of have the same expectation for tonight. I think Biden will handle himself well. I think Bernie knows how to handle himself well. The one that has maybe the most at stake is Mayor Pete. Can he really stand out on a crowded stage? Does he have what it takes to kind of hold the space and look like a potential commander-in-chief? And then, you know, you've got some interesting characters, the Andrew Yangs, the Marianne Williamson, who are kind of wild cards. How are they going to fare? People have moments. I don't know that it's going to be particularly game-changing, but it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
It'll be interesting. Thanks, Krystal. We appreciate it.
Miss you guys. See you soon.
We miss you.
See ya.
Next on Rising, the president has already tweeted his reaction to debate night one.
Does Trump 2020 Director of Strategic Communications Mark Lauder agree the night was boring? He's going to share his own thoughts with us next here on Rising.